Hi, everyone. Welcome to the conversation in Ig Nobel in the Journal of Improbable Research for our very first improbable conversation. We're totally thrilled you can all join us today for this improbable conversation, where the Ig Nobel forces of improbable research and the conversation combine for a very dangerously smart and rational discussion about cats. I'm Beth Daly, General Manager of the Conversation US. Because some of you may not know who we are, I just want to take a quick minute to explain who we are. We are a global online media organization, and our journalism is written by academics and edited by our team of excellent journalists. We publish around 10 to 12 articles per day from a range of categories: politics, health, education, animals, science, economy, environment, religion. We're 7 years old, and we're in now 9 countries. Our mission is to democratize knowledge for the public good. And normally I'd say we have very serious webinars on very important, serious topics that we all know too much about, COVID and politics. And we are utterly thrilled today that we're going to have a hopefully lighthearted conversation about cats and their psychology and the physics of them. Let me just take 1 minute for some housekeeping stuff before I introduce our esteemed guests. This webinar is being recorded. It will be shared with everyone who signed up for it afterwards. Please type your questions into the Q&A as the conversation progresses. We will see them privately and answer as many as possible, and then we'll take some to the air. And I am gonna disable the chat, not because the conversation is not robust and great, but it may be a little distracting for our host and panelists. So, brief bios of the 3 speakers. First, I'm totally thrilled to introduce someone who I've been listening to and watching for years. And when I first heard about the Ig Nobel Awards, when I went to college in Boston, I thought it was the most brilliant thing ever. And now I've met the guy behind it. It's Marc Abrahams. He's the editor and co-founder of the Now of Improbable Research and the originator and master of ceremonies of the annual Ig Nobel Prize celebration. He was formerly the editor of the Journal of Irreproducible Results. And I'm often used to
say it slowly. That's the only possible way.
Yeah, I'm not going to try again. I'll let you say it. And I'm used to seeing Marc in a top hat during the great Ig Nobel Awards that I hope you all check out. Berko Gleason, who I'm so proud to secondly announce, is a psycholinguist and professor emerita of psychological and brain science at Boston University, psychology and brain science at Boston University. She is amazing, and she's made enormous contributions to the understanding of language acquisition in children, gender difference in language development, and parent-child interactions. She's the author or co-author of 125 papers or more on language development, an editor, co-editor of 2 textbooks. She is a cat enthusiast, self-described, and we'll hear more about that, and a frequent guest on the Ig Nobel Awards. Lastly, Marc-Antoine Fardin is a researcher at the University of Paris. He is the winner. Everyone should be very proud to be on this call because you're talking to the winner of the Ig Nobel Prize in Physics in 2017 for exploring the use of fluid dynamics to probe the important question: can a cat be both solid and a liquid? A topic he explained in the conversation and will share with you. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to the master of ceremonies and disappear for a little while. Marc, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is a kind of experiment. We've never done this before. The essence of what we're doing is taking 2 researchers from very different fields and give them the chance to explore each other's worlds a little bit. So I'm going to try to just push that along, but more or less disappear. You've heard our 2 wonderful researchers here. Psychology and physics don't necessarily overlap blatantly all that much, but today they will. I'm going to mention at the start, each of these people is famous for a publication they did fairly early in their careers. Jean Berko Gleason, back in 1958, was it, Jean?
It
Published
was
a thing called the WUG test. And if you somehow have not run across Jean, be aware that large sections of the universe know and many who don't hate her worship her. The only ones who hate her are about three kind of crazy people. Everybody else who's met her worships her. She's extremely famous for this thing she did, her first thing early in her academic career, the WUG test. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And Marc, early in his career, which is still a career that's in its early stages, published this paper called On the Rheology of Cats. And that's what we're going to start talking about. And I want to urge Jean, jump in as much as possible. And then we're going to discuss some of your stuff. Marc, first of all, maybe if you explain that word rheology, which I think most people have not run across. What is rheology?
Rheology is a word that was invented, I think, in the 1920s, and it's based on the Greek, I think, rheo and logi. So it's the logic or the science of flow. And the roots, I think, I mean, you find the same rheo Greek root, I think, here. Jean will be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but basically you find this in a few other words. One, for instance, is logoria. So it's kind of the opposite of rheology. Rheology is the science of flows, and logoria is when you're just talking constantly nonsense.
Flowing words.
Exactly. And another much more famous word that has the same root is diarrhea, which needs no explanation, but you find the same roots. So to flow, rheo, and logi is the science of, so rheology is the science of flows and deformations.
So this is, rheology is studying anything, everything that flows.
Exactly.
And thanks to you, largely, that now includes cats. How did that happen?
Yeah, so the rheology, so rheology as a field, it came as kind of, it was at the intersection. It was a field that was built because people found themselves at the beginning of the 20th century, chemists and engineers and physicists, they found themselves interested in the same topics, but they had different backgrounds. And they realized that they were all interested in the way materials can deform, like elastic solids, or they can flow like liquids.
What's an example of an elastic solid that most people
so an
would run
elastic
across?
solid, for instance, would be, even the table or the floor on which you walk. Those are elastic solid. They just have a very, very strong kind of stiffness. So you don't
Yeah,
really,
most people don't think of those as being very
exactly.
elastic.
But then you find like more like if you have some form of plastics or some form of material that kind of can deform under the force that you can apply with your own fingers. There are a few, and then they can take back their form that they had before you were pressing on them.
Are
So
you an elastic solid? Is Jean an elastic solid?
well, I think that that's kind of what the rheologists discovered, is that the characterization of a material, I mean, to say that a material is a solid or to say that it is a liquid or a fluid more generally, really is not as clear cut as what people thought in the 19th century. So people in the 19th century were kind of classifying materials around them as either liquid or solid. But what people realized in the 1920s was that depending on how long you wait, a material can appear solid or liquid. So for a human being, like if you touch yourself, it feels solid. But if you look at yourself, over the years, there is part of you that becomes a little softer and liquid. And so when the time of the day advances, like for me here, it's more than 10 o'clock, I'm sitting on my couch and I'm becoming more and more liquid. So that's
if
the
you
kind of
have
question.
like a highway that comes down a hill, does the highway itself slowly flow down?
Exactly. Yeah. When you look at some roads sometime over the years, especially when the slope has an incline, and when the road has an incline, you see that the stuff that they put on the road, it kind of flows very, very slowly. Next to my apartment, there is an ATM, and everybody stands there getting their money. And so the ground just in front of the ATM has this little kind of hole because everybody kind of comes there, put their pressure on it, and over the years the thing kind of sinks in as a liquid would.
Okay, now cats. How does this apply to cats?
Yeah,
What did you
so
do to these cats in a theoretical way?
the cat's idea. So all of the 20th century, I mean, basically the history of rheology was kind of the rheologists have been trying to put this kind of fact that we just discussed, the fact that the distinction between liquid and solid is not as clear cut. They try to show this in many, many different instances. And I was on the internet a few years ago, and I saw this a set of web pages that were discussing this question. So they had a question, they were saying, are cats liquid? And then they had the definition of a liquid. And the usual definition of a liquid is a material that takes the shape of its container. So if I pour liquid into a mug, the liquid is going to take the shape of the mug. If I pour it into a wine glass, it's going to take the shape of the wine glass.
So it doesn't have another feature that it takes the shape of the thing, but it maintains the same value.
Exactly, yeah. You made an important distinction, is that if you just said what I had said, which is that it takes the shape of the container, it's called a fluid, and a fluid is a category that includes liquid, which take the shape but keep the volume, and the gas, which takes the shape but also changes the volume. And
Learned a lot just watching you.
thank you, Jean. And
Gene, so far from what you've heard, does this apply to your own cat?
My
so
own?
I don't have a cat,
Yes.
but basically that was the question I was asked, is that if you look at a bunch of different cats, there are many, many different pictures and experiments that have been run by many, many people around the world, where you see the cats taking the shape of the container. So cats get into boxes and they get there, or into sink, and they take the shape of the container. And so people were asking this question, and so I took this question and put it into the modern lingo of rheology to kind of give it a
Mark,
little.
in your paper, one of the things you discuss that was sort of touched on here, but not with this word, is compressibility. Could you talk about that? The compressibility of cats.
So exactly, so a difference, so in the language that people have used in the dynamics of fluids, a distinction that is being done between a liquid and a gas, as Jean was highlighting, is the fact that the gas will change its volume. And another way of saying it is that a gas, in comparison to a liquid, is compressible. So it means that if you were to push it, you could change its volume. And so the question for cats, once you answer that the cat might be a liquid, you might also push the question a little further and ask if in some cases it can be gas. And so if it is a gas, it should be compressible. And that's an experiment that I've not done because I don't want to get into any trouble with, you know.
Right. Now, a cat can also be a solid, of course.
Yeah.
What about, how is it that you've got this thing, this quantity, if you want to think of a cat as being a quantity, that can be one or the other?
So really the thing that I was, I think, trying to put forth in the article, and it's really kind of one of the basics of rheology, is this kind of realization that if you say that a liquid is a material that will adapt its shape to its container, to adapt your shape is an action. And so it needs some time to unfold. And so really, when you're asking whether a material is able to adapt to its container, you're really comparing the time that it would naturally take to adapt its shape and the time that you're willing to invest in waiting to see if it's going to adapt its shape. And so really, it's a comparison of timescales that you're doing.
You could do a similar thing with mountains.
Yeah, so they are fascinating. So the example of the road is one good example that can be seen on, like, in a few years, you can see kind of the stuff that they put on the road kind of flow down. And for glaciers, you have wonderful time lapse that have been taken now over many years, maybe 10 years, of glaciers flowing down valleys. And sometimes when you see like a picture that is taken from a plane or from space, you can really see that the glaciers, they are kind of flowing down the valley. And really, over time, they will move. It's just that they move so slowly that you, at the scale of you walking on it, you don't really realize that they are liquid, but they are. And if you had the leisure to wait million years and look at a time lapse of mountain ranges, you would see that they are kind of waves on the ocean and that they would flow in the same way.
And there's this thing which you discuss in your paper called the Deborah number, which you also sort of defined just a minute ago. It's to describe how far along something is, comparing how long you're willing to sit there and wait and watch it with how quickly it changes.
Yeah.
And so something like water changes quickly. You don't have to wait very long, but something like a big hunk of ice changes very slowly. You do have to wait a long time. So they have very different Deborah numbers. And you can, just by calculating roughly this number, you can get a pretty good quick feel for whether something is mostly a liquid in your mind or mostly a solid.
Yeah, exactly. So the Deborah number is the ratio that I was talking about. So if the character, we talk about the characteristic time of a material. So if the characteristic time to adapt to your shape is, say, a minute, and you're only observing on a second, then the ratio of those two times is going to be, so if the relaxation time is 1 minute and you're looking at 1 second, what you're going to be looking at for the Deborah number, which is just a number, it has no unit, is 60, right? It's the ratio of a minute, the number of seconds into a minute, and 60 is a high Deborah number. And so when the Deborah number is high, it means that what you're going to see is going to look like a solid. But then if
different cats, say older and younger cats, if you wanted to take the time, you could even figure out which cat has what Deborah number, and that would give you an idea for how quickly that cat adapts.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, a lot of work.
See if you can figure out, even though you can't see Jean's cat, who's wandering somewhere elsewhere in Jean's house, maybe by asking a couple of questions to Jean, you can come up.
I'll show him to you.
Yeah, well, if you can get him. But Marc, maybe you can kind of roughly calculate the Deborah number for Jean's cat by asking her some questions.
So the Deborah number, right, is going to be, so you have two times. This, the time you're willing to invest, and this is going to be as small or as large as your patient can endure. But
Jean
what you
is
can
a very patient person.
The rheologists try to measure is the relaxation time. So the rheologists are really kind of diverting from the question, is something solid or liquid? They are asking now a question like, okay, your material is going to have some relaxation time. What is it? For instance, is the cat going to get soft and relax and become a liquid on a time scale of, say, 10 minutes or an hour, or is it more turbulent? And so then they're going to ask questions like the one that you're asking is, what is this relaxation time depending on? Like if the temperature in the room is higher or lower, is the cat more likely to get mellow and kind of flow? Or is the age of the cat important? Is the younger cat more dynamic and less liquid? Is the older cat more liquid? And so these are questions that are.
Well, ask Jean a couple of questions and see if we can tease out a Deborah number that applies to her cat.
So what would you say, Jean, are good conditions for your cat to relax?
Oh, practically any condition. A fuzzy blanket. Cats, there's something about fuzzy blankets that cats can't resist. And I by now have sent basically the same fuzzy blanket that looks like a cheetah to about 5 of my friends. And we've all taken pictures of our cats going brr, 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 because they can't resist. So I would say fuzzy blankets, warm radiators, sitting in the sun, actually being able to go out and roll in the grass. All of those things are, cats really know how to relax. I mean, they're so far ahead of us in so many ways, but relaxation is certainly one of them.
Marc, what specific information do you need from Jean to calculate the Deborah number for her specific cat?
So once you start, you say, okay, I'm gonna look. So you give the observation time. So let's say you're gonna observe for 10 minutes. And then if you want to get the Deborah number, so 10 minutes is going to be the stuff that you kind of fix. It's your experimental setting. So you said 10 minutes, and then you want to know the relaxation time of your cat. And so then if the cat kind of relaxes because it's near a radiator and it has a fuzzy blanket, if it relaxes in 2 minutes, then it's going to be 2/10. And then you're going to get a Deborah number that is going to be a fifth, which is a number lower than 1, and usually the idea is when it's lower than 1, you said that it's more liquid. So in that case, the cat would be characterized as liquid.
Those numbers seem to work for you, Jean?
Um, I'm not good at calculating. Let's talk about cats.
Let's talk about cats.
It's time to talk about kitty cats.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really want to show the picture of a cat. Do you think I can
Yeah.
share my screen?
Give it a try.
I'm going to give it a try because I want to, because there's something you're talking about Deborah numbers, but let me just show you something here. Now, can you hear me?
Can hear you, yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we're talking about relaxation. You know that looking at this cat does wonderful things for you. That is,
Yeah.
that there's a lot of research that shows that being near cats or listening to cats purr really is good for your health. So I'll get out of here, but I wanted you to see this kitty, and I'm going to get back to her in a bit if we're allowed to. That is, if I know how to unshare my screen.
Okay.
Yep.
How old is that cat in that picture?
That cat, that picture was taken by my daughter Pam in Aiken, South Carolina. The cat she got the cat around December. It's a couple months old. It's a
Okay,
wonderful.
and your cat Foster is how old now?
Oh, well, you'll have to calculate that. He was born around, he's about 10 or 12. I'd say he's 11.
Does he flow as easily and as quickly now as he did when he was, say, 6 months old or a
No,
year
he's
old?
gotten very chunky. So he's not nearly as supple. We were going to talk a little bit about the
So,
supple.
Mark, roughly how much might the Deborah number for this cat have changed over the past decade?
Well, the Deborah number itself, I don't know, but because it depends on how much you look at it.
Very
But the
roughly. I mean,
relaxation time,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if it's less, if it's stiffer, if it used to be stiffer, or if it means that the relaxation time decreased over time. But if it's stiffer now, it's the other way around. But
Ah.
basically, these are the words that that the rheologists would use.
Okay, let's talk about language a little bit now too, and cats. And I will mention that, as both of you know, and many of the people watching know, one of the Ig Nobel prizes in the most recent ceremony was given to a team of scientists in Sweden, the University of Lund, who studied how cats communicate with humans, studied the sounds, the different sounds that cats make when they apparently communicate with humans, or humans apparently communicate with them. And both of you have touched on that a little bit.
Right. Well, they
Jean,
are phonologists. They are phoneticians, really. So they're really looking at the phonetics of what cats are doing. And now, of course, we have all kinds of equipment that we can make sound spectrographs and things of look at the fundamental frequency and look at the different hertz that, you know, what noises the cats make. And they find that there are like 10 or 12 different noises that cats make. There's hissing and growling and meowing and purring and all of those things. But one thing that really struck me reading their paper is that most of the sounds that cats make are like the sounds we make. Namely, they go through their larynx and their vocal cords or whatever you want to call it. But that's not true of purring. Purring actually involves the entire larynx of the cat. So it vibrates constantly. So if you notice, a cat can breathe in and out while purring, but it can't breathe in and out while meowing, because in order to meow, it has to put air through its larynx. But purring you can do constantly. And then nobody understands about purring.
Yeah, language is something that's been a part of your life professionally and otherwise for pretty much your whole life. And you became famous for studying, well, the WUG test, which I didn't describe, and maybe you should briefly for anybody.
Would you like to see a WUG?
Please.
If I can share my screen, I'll show you, and then I'll tell you what it's about.
Okay. Well, actually, I can do it for you. I've got here a WUG mug.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a WUG. Okay. So that's a WUG. Now there's another one. There are two of them. There are two
WUGs.
Very good. You're as good as a 4-year-old. Well, it's true. Stop share. I keep trying to stop the share and I can't do it right. Okay, so the WUG test is something, as Mark says, that I did a million. Look, I was only like 3 or 4 years old. I mean, I was a very young person when at 1958. We won't talk about it. But what I did when I did the WUG test was that it was a test of kids' ability to make things like plurals and past tenses of words in English. This was done in English. And the whole point of the test was to find out whether or not even little kids don't just memorize language, but actually have a system so that they can deal with words they've never seen before. You know, we can, if somebody says, you know, I had an abdominoplasty. Okay, well, you may not know what an abdominoplasty is, but you know what two of them are. I mean, you know how to make the plural. Adults know how to make the plural of words they've never heard before. And we didn't know whether or not kids knew kind of the rules of English, how to make a plural, how to make a past tense.
And you're talking about kids before they go to school and really get taught any of this explicitly.
Like kids 4, 5, 6 years old.
Yep.
So that the WUG test, you can give the WUG test to a 4-year-old. It's not just one WUG, 2 WUGs. It's a whole bunch of stuff. Let me show you another one since I've gotten so wonderfully good at sharing the screen here.
Please do.
Okay, now look, this is a man who knows how to zib. What is he doing? He is
Zibbing.
zibbing. Okay, so you know how to make progressive. Here's another one, and kids are really good at that. What would you call a man whose job is to zib?
I'm gonna give the kid answer. A zib man.
Oh, who said that? Mark, did you say that?
Yeah.
How did you know that?
Because I've watched your videos. I'm a fan.
Oh, okay, because that is what kids say. They will say it's a zib man, but when they get to be 4, 5, 6 years old, they begin to add that little ending, that little what you call an agentive ending, like bake, baker, gardener, gardener, all of that. So that's a very productive thing in English. You can almost always make an actor out of a verb that way by saying but to it. And sure enough, we demonstrated that. I did a show with Stephen Fry, who came to Cambridge from England to do various things. And we went to the Harvard Daycare Center, and a little girl, you showed this to a little girl, and she was like, 5 years old. I said, what would you call a man whose job is to zib? And she said, I said, come on, say it. And she said, zipper. And Stephen Fry fainted. I mean, it was Mark, you were there. Do you remember that?
I was there. Yeah.
It was just really remarkable.
He's a very large human being. You don't want a large human being near you fainting.
People know, I mean, Stephen Fry, the British actor and writer and everything. He's a wonderful person. He'd come to Cambridge for some other reason. Actually, he'd been given an award by the Harvard.
It just occurred to me he turned from a solid into a liquid as we were watching at that moment because of you.
You really do that? Well, that's very good. Well, I'm very good at that. I'm not very big, but I'm very powerful. Anyway, anyhow, so that was the WUG test. Okay, so the WUG test showed for the first time that little kids don't just memorize the language around them. That, because if you say, here's a dog, here's another one, so this is a dog and this is now 2. If the kid says dogs, that doesn't prove much except that the kid has heard the word dogs. But if the kid says 1 WUG, 2 WUGs, they never heard the word WUGs before, so they know how to make the plural. So that was a big excitement that kids, we're talking about what later became the cognitive revolution. There was a whole period, what you call the cognitive revolution, and cats enter into this, by the way, because I showed that kids could do this, but now there's a whole field of animal cognition that did not exist then. And that's one of the interesting things about cats, of course, is that all those people out there have cats. They know what I'm talking about. Yet, your cat's smart, but the cat is too smart to fall for all kinds of things you try to do to make it perform. Okay, so my cat Foster knows his name is Foster. Okay, but I can say, come on, Foster, and he looks at me. He's not about to get up and go anywhere. So the people who do cat cognition have a lot of problems. If you have a dog, look, I have nothing. Mark, you've got a dog, and dogs are a dog, and they're fine, except if you and I want to talk about the disgust factor, which Mark knows that I have a lot of disgusting things that disgust me. Okay.
Yeah, let me pause for a second. If you could just give us 1 or 2 examples of things that disgust you, Jean.
Oh, there are words that disgust me. Luscious, disgusting word.
Disgusting.
All kinds of.
Mark, your first language is French.
Yeah.
And you're obviously, you're
What is dig?
extremely good in English, but does that word disgust you when you hear it, that English word?
Lush.
Luscious?
Yeah, I mean there are some French word that I don't like. Also, I have
Such
a
as?
friend, and when we were in high school, she was telling me she really dislikes a very particular combination of words, which is paupiette de veau petit pois. So, which means it's a type of dish. So it's a type of veal dish with some peas. Paupiette de veau petit pois, and she just dislikes that. She finds it, just the sound of it is disgusting to her.
Yeah, well, kids, when they get to be around 6 or 7, they begin to pay attention to language, and they begin to understand what a word is and all of that. There's a reason why kids the world around are taught to read when they're around 6 or 7, because that's the point at which they have what you call meta-linguistic ability. They're able to think about language. So if you say to a little bitty kid, what's your favorite word? 4-year-old, you know what the kid's going to say? Ice cream. Cookies, cake, something of this sort. But when they get a little, because because their favorite word's their favorite thing. But when they get a little bit older, you say, what's your favorite word? The kid might say, as I would, pumpernickel. Well, it doesn't mean the kid likes pumpernickel, okay? The kid likes the word pumpernickel. And then an advance in cognition in kids that makes it a lot easier to learn to read, because now they begin to understand that they could consider words as objects. So,
let me ask another question to take advantage of having Marc with his at least 2 languages here, and Jean, who evaluates how people play with language. One of the many things that Jean has done professionally in her career was work on a project that looked at people swearing. And these are people who have more than one language. And you were comparing, Jean, I think, the effect of it when people swear in their own language or when they swear in what for them is their second language. And I think you found there's often a great difference, right?
Oh, there is. This is research I did with my colleague, Catherine Caldwell Harris, who luckily had a machine like a lie detector, something that would give you galvanic skin responses, would give you a response to your skin. And here's one of the things that happens is that if you learn a first language, taboo words, for instance, when you say I'm not even able to say them. If you say a taboo word in your own native language.
For example?
I can't say it, Marc.
Say it in a different language.
Merde, okay? Yes. Easy to say in French, okay? Yeah. And for you. Out that people have discovered that they can say these emotionally laden things in a second language, and it's easier. And you always wonder why. Well, there's a real physiological component when you say poo-poo words in English. I'm old enough that it's such a taboo word I can't even say it. Okay, but if you had me,
what word is that, Jean?
You know what it is. If
no,
had me hooked up to a galvanic skin reactor machine, it would go boom when I said it. But if I say merde alors, in French, just poop like that. It doesn't do much. And
Marc, does this ring true for you, Marc? When you swear in English,
as we were talking, I'm wondering if it's in French or in English that I can say more swear words. Yeah. And I don't know. I would say I'm pretty bad at both.
Well, how about when you're, this is a question I know Jean and her colleagues in the paper, that when somebody who is close to you, a spouse or loved one, swears at you, really angry, is there a difference if they swear in your own language or if they're swearing in what is their second language?
I don't know the answer to that, but what I can tell you.
What I remember was if they swear at you in what is for both of you a foreign language.
Oh yeah, well it's nice.
It doesn't necessarily have the real bite and sting, but if they swear in your own language, but
it's not just swear words. It turns out that all kinds of emotionally laden things that you hear when you're a kid end up in your body. So that, for instance, if I were to hook you up to a machine, okay, and say neutral things at you, and then say things like, go to your room, or you're a bad boy, believe it or not, you're still carrying that with you. You're still carrying the physiological reaction that language is not just in your brain, it's in your body as well. And your first language is hooked up to your emotional system in a way that later languages are not. And that's really one of the things that we showed. It's not just taboo words, it's
Mark,
reprimand.
does all of this seem to go along with your understanding of what language means to you?
I have to interrupt for an important announcement.
Okay.
You're not going to swear, are you?
I'm not going to swear, but I have many people writing in who know Jean. Jean, like I think all of your postdocs are here somewhere because I keep writing question. And
I have friends all over the world.
They are there. I don't know where they're from, but I have a question that feels quite urgent, as several people have asked it in different forums. Okay, and this one comes from Janet Fardello Schaefer, who I believe got into her work because of you, or was one of your postdocs.
I remember Janet well. She worked in the lab and she did all sorts of wonderful things. She worked on Hi, Thanks, and Goodbye.
Oh, there you go. But okay, this is an important cat question.
Yes.
Based on your expertise as a psycholinguist, have
Yes.
humans been communicating efficiently with cats? And if not, how should they? I'm sort of got like 10 questions in there.
Okay. Well, in the first place, cats have been communicating very efficiently with us. We've had cats as pets, so to call, for like 14,000 years. And in the 14,000 years, the cats have told us that they want to live with us and that they would like a comfortable bed and they want food and they want us to snuggle with them. In other words, the cats have really communicated all of their interests and needs such that we're running around doing whatever they have in mind. So they're doing a very good job. Our problem with communicating with cats is that what I said earlier is that you can try to train cats, but for instance, cats who take part in psychology studies frequently, there's this thing called informed consent. And one of the things in informed consent is it says you are free to leave at any time. Well, the cat really believes that. Okay. The cat read the paragraph that said that you may leave at any time. You're not constrained to stay. Because the cat says, I'm out of here. And the cats just leave. The cats do not hang around for the rest of your study. So we've been communicating with them. And I think what people are trying to do really is learn much more about their body language. One of the things that has happened in recent years, and this isn't quite language, but it is that we've begun to understand that cats have different facial expressions. And there's been some research recently in which, for instance, veterinarians or people who work in cat hospitals, they are able to tell the 5 or 6 cat facial expressions apart, but we're not terribly good at that. Although, if you have Beth, I think you think your cat, can you understand what your cat is saying? Or you understand the facial expression?
My cat tends to speak in physical terms to me, mostly by clawing. So I don't, her facial expression is always the same. It's this.
Yeah, well, it's resting cat face. But cats are smart. They're very smart. It's just that they are also, one of the things that we hate and love about them is that they are tremendously independent. And, if we're going to contrast cats and dogs, because dogs are like perpetual adolescents, they want to do whatever you want. One of the reasons I asked my daughter, Pam, why we get these wonderful pictures of cats. Well, that's because that little tiny kitty was not going to fall all over you. If you get down on the floor to take a picture of a puppy, the next thing you know, you've got puppy tongue all over your face. I mean, you got a dog in the face, you got puppies everywhere. But the cat is sort of, sitting there and posing in this incredibly beautiful way. So there's a big difference. So the evolution of communication with cats is that we've begun to understand that they have different sounds that they make. This researchers in Sweden, as I say, have shown 10 or 12 different sounds they make. And of course, they make them for different reasons. They're not all to humans. And cats, cats don't spend a lot of time meowing at one another in nature, but they have other sounds they make. So we've begun to understand their facial expressions. We've begun to understand their vocal expressions. And we have tried to communicate with them, but they don't necessarily let us know what they know. So it's harder. Cat cognition is it's a very new field, but it's growing. We'll get there. I don't know if that answered Janet's question yet. Hello, Janet.
I think it did, and it brought up a lot more questions as people are populating. So, Mark, I don't know if you want me. There's so many questions coming in. I don't know if you want me to go ahead, ask them, and just interrupt. Now, I do want to say I want to do a disclaimer here because we're getting into the cat questions now. We all love cats, Jean in particular, and Mark has studied them, but I want to put a disclaimer that the answers may be funny. So, okay. Is a cat a solid when it's
Beth,
sitting on?
I need to interrupt because
Okay.
when you're interviewing any academic or anybody else, but especially an academic, the statement you just made is always true. It's just you're not supposed to make that statement.
That's true, but I did disclaimer that I can't ascribe to the veracity of what they're saying, but they're very good questions and they are all over the map. So the first
Ask
question
away.
is for Mark. Is a cat a solid when it's on your lap? I think that's maybe an obvious question, but why don't you go ahead and answer it?
Well, I don't know if it is that obvious in a sense that like if it just jumped on your lap, it just changed its shape. So I mean, it was running around and then it jumped on your lap and then it changed its shape. So in some way it just kind of got liquefied. But then if it started like doing this thing that sometimes the cats do for a couple of minutes before they really settle, like when they scratch your knees with their little claws, like this is not very liquid to my mind. But then if the time passes and they get into the positions that they feel is the exact right one, then they can get a little more liquid, which is really the state that you want your cat in when it's on your lap.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So that kneading that they do. Oh, so many questions are coming in. Okay. One of my cats. Oh, this is an interesting question. So many pictures of cats as a liquid are photoshopped. How do you tell the difference?
I mean, a lot of the pictures that you see on the internet are Photoshop, disclaimer, regardless, even if it's not a cat. So you have to kind of run the numbers and compare. And some people did experiment, and send me like kind of the raw pictures. So these I kind of trust more, but yeah, some of them are a little ridiculous, and I don't think that I took them into account in the broader set of data that I thoroughly analyzed for the paper.
I'd like to go back to a question that I feel I didn't really answer. Can I go back to it for just a moment? I know they're wonderful questions, so I hate to do this, but back to the question of communicating with cats. We do have ways of talking to cats, and I ought to make that clear, is that everybody, when they talk, has different ways of talking to different people. In the linguistics world, they call it a register. So that, for instance, when you're talking to the boss, you may talk in a rather formal way. When you were talking among ourselves, we have a particular way of talking. When we're talking to people who don't know the language very well, we have a special way of talking, and that's the way we talk to kids. Now, I think this is important because a lot of people regard their cats as their kids. They talk about their fur babies. Research has shown that the language to your plants, for instance, or to your cats or your dogs is not exactly the same as language to kids. And another one is foreigner talk. If somebody asks you a question in the street, they can't speak English if you're an English speaker. So these are all called simplified registers, okay? But there are different criteria, there are different characteristics of the registers. So that, for instance, when you're talking to a little kid, it's simple, it's clear, you have some teaching in mind, and it's full of affection. That's all that music that you hear is affectionate. So when people talk to their cats, they do a lot of the affection, okay? And they may or may not do the clarity sort of stuff, but they don't do the language teaching. So that, for instance, when you say to a little kid, that's your foot, but people put new words at the end of a sentence. What a big boy, or that's a ball, bring mommy the ball. You don't really do that with your cat so much unless you do think it's your kid. I do it to Foster. I keep saying, this is your tail. And I keep wondering why he doesn't say, yeah, it's my tail. But he doesn't learn, he doesn't speak. But so these simplified registers we have, and people have, I think it was Gadet's question, people have studied foreigner talk and pet talk and plant talk and all of those kinds of things. And well,
Plant
first,
talk?
consider foreigner talk. If
Did you say plant talk?
Well, yeah, people talk to their plants. I mean,
And there's a different way?
well, yeah, I haven't done plant talk, but I've looked at foreigner talk, and here's the big thing. As I said,
Mark, have you ever talked to your plants?
I do not talk to my plants, but I definitely give their names.
Yeah. Well, and it's good for them too. They appreciate that. You see, there's a whole world of plant cognition out there too, as you know. I mean, if you look at the Smithsonian channel, you'll be blown away by what trees are telling one another. But that's another topic. But the thing about foreigner talk is that it's simplified, but it is not full of affect. Okay, so the foreigner asks you where the library is. You don't say, "Oh, it's on the corner, sweetie." You say, "Library on corner, go right." I mean, you may simplify, but you're not going to fill it full of affect. So when we talk to animals, we talk to our cats. It's full of love. It's just full of love, and you can hear all of that love and what people are saying. So I think that it answered the question about communicating with our animals. We are communicating with them in a very affective, affectionate way. They know, the cat knows just the way the baby knows. When you say no, 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 they know to stop it. And when you tell them that they're a lovely kitty, etc. So that's the thing that I should have mentioned about communicating with your cats.
I think that's really valuable. I mean, whether they listen to you actually is a different matter, of course. But Jean, I have a question from Martin Kendall Reed. And then a few more for Mark. Do cats undergo language development in terms of their repertoire of vocalizations? Do they develop their own language, over time?
Well, I'm sorry to say that I'm not the person who studies that. The folks in Sweden are looking at it, and I don't think they've looked at kittens. They've looked at like 60 or 70 grown cats, but I think developmental catalinguists have not appeared yet. But it'll happen. It'll happen because somebody will say, "Okay, here's a newborn kitten, and here's what it does, and here's what they do at 6 weeks." I mean, once you start. Every question's an interesting question. And certainly developmental cat sounds is a fascinating question. But
Jean, you seem to be saying that so far, as of now, there is not yet a WUG test for cats, correct?
Well, if there were, the cats would maybe watch it and maybe not. Can I show a picture of my cat, Foster?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody could or would stop you.
You
Please
think
do.
I came here to talk? I came to show pictures of my cat. And if I can't, okay. So here we go. There. Now, this is an example of cat relaxation. Does he look relaxed? Does he look relaxed to you?
Oh.
Yes, my cat, Foster. Okay.
What is he saying to you right there?
He's just saying, "I love it in this bed." I'm really sorry, Mark, that I didn't bring one of my favorite pictures. Because several years ago, I began to pack my suitcase to go to California, and Foster got into the suitcase. And it would have been a perfect illustration because I have a picture of the most smashed cat you've ever seen. I mean, he's got his face scrunched up and his ears are down, and he's smashed into this suitcase because he wanted to go. I mean, there he is. I'll email. Can we make the picture available somewhere? I can send it to you.
Absolutely.
Smashed cat. I think smashed cat is a very good thing to have.
We're going to send it. We'll send it along when we send out the webinar.
Yes.
So lots more questions about about the liquid solid question about cats, and then humans for Mark. And then I don't want to, and I'm sure Marc Abrahams has other questions too. So, okay, are cats, this is interesting, are cats gelatinous? That's,
Yeah. So the rheologists first kind of completely changed the distinction that people used to make between liquid and solid and gas. And then they also started studying a whole range of weird stuff that kind of even less fit into the different categories. So for instance, you have different types of gels, which are kind of solid in some ways, but they are kind of liquid in other ways. And then you have sort of paste and foam and all sorts of materials like this. So in some sense, like, the cat is not a simple material. And so kind of an umbrella term for all of those kind of materials that kind of challenge the usual categories, people say complex materials. So scientists kind of, as usual, kind of put the word complex when they're kind of running out of imagination. So it just means something that is not simple. And then those people, the rheologists, call simple like kind of the traditional standard liquid. So for instance, water is what they call a simple liquid. Of course, people who really study water even today will disagree with this, and they would say, no, water is not simple. It's complex for many, many different reasons. So, but for rheologists, simple is, water or air or some sort of elastic material. And complex materials are everything else.
there you go. Okay,
Yeah.
this is a philosophical question that I'm going to pose to even Marc Abrahams and Jean, and then Mark. Should humans aspire to be more liquid? If so, why and how?
Oh, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
think it's our ultimate fate anyway, There
That's a
we
big part of what yoga is designed to do, isn't it? Make
Be
people a little more liquid.
keep our joints going. So back to cats. Why are they so wonderful? We were going to talk about that, and time is running out. So
they are alien spies.
we have to quickly say what's so wonderful about cats, okay? And can you remember the picture I showed? One of the things in that picture is the cat's unbelievable symmetry. Cats are beautiful. And people who've studied beauty in humans point out that people who are thought to be beautiful are symmetrical, have symmetrical faces.
Right.
Cats have wonderfully symmetrical bodies. They are all put together. They're in proportion so that they're beautiful to look at. I mean, it is no surprise that the Egyptians made gods of them because they're self-contained, they're symmetrical, they're beautiful, and they can get along without you. I mean, dogs are wonderful, but dogs have arrested development. Cats, you're living with an animal that could take care of itself and is completely self-contained out there, but then comes and snuggles in the bed with you. And this is a marvelous thing. It connects us to the larger world, of nature. You know that the cat is really closely related to that panther out there, but it's a little panther that won't kill you. And it's just wonderful.
There's that William Blake poem about the tiger that has some line in there about the fearful symmetry.
Well, but it's true. If I showed you that picture.
And you said cats are connected to nature, and indeed they are. As you know from your cat, that if they get outdoors where there's lots of nature, like little birds.
Talk about that. We're not going to talk.
No, we're not going to talk about that.
Out there, and we're not going to get. Beth knows what I'm talking about. We're not going to get in the cat.
We can't get into that conversation. It will devolve.
We're not going to get into that.
It's nature. All nature is wonderful, isn't it?
No, but cats are much closer to nature for us. They are a direct connection to the actual world, of the one beautiful world out there. And I think we all feel it. We're going to talk about the fluidity of their movement, not just because they're liquids, but because they are so graceful, because they are so gorgeous to watch. So that watching cats is much better than watching television.
Dana, I just wanted to say one comment from many comments. Dana says, here's one answer. Cats are so wonderful because they can pull in pure prana, turn it into a form that humans can assimilate. sort of like that.
They are what? Sorry, I didn't get that.
Oh, cats are so wonderful because they can pull in pure prana, turn it into a form, and turn it into a form that humans can assimilate.
Yeah, that or that's a great conspiracy theory that I saw online. They are alien spies. I like that because it's
Well,
true
you
that
know, if
sometimes.
cats didn't exist and somebody discovered them, everybody would want one. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, consider any other wild animal that you suddenly find. You know, what if you said, I have found the most amazing thing. I found a kangaroo. It's this big and it's toilet trained and it will sleep in your bed and it will love you. But it's a kangaroo and it will jump around outside as well. People would say, unbelievable. Let's get a kangaroo, you know, but we don't get to have other animals like this. It's wonderful to have a cat because you've got a self-contained piece of the wild world and the domestic world all together.
I will point out a little point of history during that they actually tried to introduce kangaroos to New York City at one point. Both as domesticated and wild, and it failed miserably for obvious reasons.
I can
True.
I knew about camels in Arizona, but I didn't know about the.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that sometime.
Yeah,
but
there's a great MIT.
but you get to live with such a little animal with such beauty and such grace and such self-containedness. It is just it's just wonderful. It's just wonderful.
It is. I have one last fairly not serious, but yes, serious for Mark. And could cats be considered to have quantum properties? Is a liquid versus solid distinction perhaps an example of a quantum superposition? I don't understand the question, but maybe you do.
Yeah, so that's a question that I think I got a few times. I don't remember how exactly I answered this usually, but so the cats in science are the cat in science is usually known in the Schrodinger's cat experiment, where it's about superposition of quantum states. And so I think the question is referring to this. So far, all of the things that I've thought about cats were in the classical realm, so to speak. So I've never really yet investigate the quantum aspect of cats. But yes, of course, you know, why not?
Mark, I'm going to let you sum up your part, then I'll sum up our part because I'm sure we have much to say.
Do we have to say
Okay,
about cats? Are we done? Or we got to add something
I
else?
think we're just about done. We need to get off soon
I
anyway.
had one thing I'd like to add. Okay.
Okay, quickly.
Please.
Okay, I'm going to add it very quickly. Here's the thing.
Could you do it in angry German? We know you're good at speaking angry German.
Fine. No, I can't. We did a study, my colleague Brendan Phillips and I did a study where we looked at parent speech to kids where they said, look at the, and of the things that parents point out to kids, 11 of the 30 most common things parents tell kids to look at are animals. And the number one animal is kitty, okay? So kitties are important to people. We love we love the living world, but we love cats and we point them out to babies and to kids all the time. It's the number one animal we mention. So I wanted to point that out.
I really need to get a cat. I really need to get a cat. I
Do
haven't
you-
had a cat for many years, and now I really need to get a cat back here. This is
Several
missing.
people on this call asked if you had a cat, Mark, and I didn't ask that of you, but now we know.
Well, I grew up with cats, but I never had cats in the recent years because I mean, I was traveling a lot, but now it's not an excuse anymore because with the pandemic, I'm not traveling at all. So I should get a cat.
I just spent 2 years with a cat. And he was a great companion. I'm very thankful to him. I think the pandemic has been fine so far as I'm concerned, because I had a constant companion who never argued.
That's so great. So I'm just so grateful for Marc Abrahams, our Ig Nobel MC and extraordinaire guy, and Mark for joining in from France at this late hour, and Jean. It's been so delightful. I think everyone understands how much we all love cats, and I love the range of this conversation. It was great. It was smart. It was rational and dangerously smart, which is the promise. We're going to send this out and edit a little bit and send it out to you guys, everyone who's listening. If you have any questions or comments or ideas or stories, feel free to send them to Lisa or to the conversation, and we'll be holding another one of these hopefully soon. Yes, thank you, everyone. We're really grateful.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jean.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Beth.
thanks to
Thank you, all the
our
conversation
out
people.
there.